Hey guys, so this video is a recap of our last session. Now, if you all noticed, at the end of the session, at the end of the live session, I was mute for like 5 to 6 seconds. The reason why I was mute is because I realized that the session was not being recorded. So I was shocked. I was mute. I was like, what? What just happened? So definitely that meant two things. Either I make a recording like this to recap the session, or we use another day, like today, right? Or we use today to repeat the class, which is not going to be fair, right? Because that's going to be us wasting extra time for something that I did for my carelessness. So I said, okay, I'd have to go with the first option, which will involve me recording this to have a recap of all we learned that day. So it's very simple. We are going to learn all we learned, or I'm going to redo everything that we did in that class. And what we covered was just array methods, how to work with arrays using array methods or array functions. And also I think we talked about nesting arrays. We also talked about concatenating arrays, like merging arrays, and we understood the relationship between arrays and objects, how to work with them. So let's get started. Let's create an array. Now, if you remember, in our session, I made mention of the fact that we are going to start using the const keyword to create variables. Now, you can still stick to using let, but going forward, I'll be making use of const and let. Now, the most cases where you'd see me use the most cases where you'd see me use const is when I want to create maybe an object literal or an array or a function. If I want to create any of these three things, I would mostly make use of const, right? So, but if I just want to create a regular variable, right, just a regular variable, I would make use of let, in that case mostly. But when I want to create an object literal or an array or a function, I would mostly make use of const going forward. So I would come here, I would create this array, I would call this array numbers, and this array is just going to have, let's have maybe 6 or 5 numbers. So I would say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. Now, it is optional for me to have my arrays arranged like this vertically. You can see some examples where arrays are arranged like this. For example, you can see an array that is arranged horizontally like this, right? There is no difference in having this arrangement with this arrangement. I'm just arranging mine vertically like this so that we can easily read it as we read things in a list. I can easily convince somebody that this is a list, then I can convince them that this is a list, right? This is a natural list arrangement than this. So that's why I'm using this vertical arrangement. So I'll take that out. Now, just to reiterate, if you create your arrays with the let keyword, you will still be fine. You will still be fine, right? I am choosing to do mine with the const keyword. So let's come here. Let's console.log this array. Let's see the array in the console. The array is called numbers. Let's go to the console and let's see what we have. You can see that, yes, we have the array in the console, and it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Now, for you to know that anything is an array, the object or the items would be wrapped in this square bracket. As you can see, there is the square bracket here on the left, there is the square bracket here on the right. The square bracket represents an array block. The square bracket represents an array block. The curly bracket represents an object literal block, right? So that's how you know that something is an array. It's going to have its data wrapped in between square brackets, just like this. So we have seen the arrays in the console, and what we are going to look at now is how we can edit an array, how we can edit the items in an array. And we are going to see how to edit items in an array using array functions or array methods. You can call them array functions, you can call them array methods, and it's still going to be fine, right? So what are the array methods or what are the array functions that we can use to edit the items in our arrays? We are going to use one array method called the onShift method. Now, the onShift method is a method that allows us to add an array item to the beginning of an array, right? So this is our array. The onShift method will allow us to add an item to the beginning. This is the beginning. So I can come here and add 23, right? And the first item in this array will become 23. Now, the onShift method does not take out what is at the beginning before it adds its own, right? It doesn't do that. It just goes there and take up that space and puts an item there at the beginning. It won't take out what was there in the first place. So that's what the onShift method does. So if I want to use the onShift method to add an item to the beginning of these numbers array, what I'll do is I'll first of all call the numbers array because that's the array I want to add an item to. So I would say numbers.onShift. Remember, onShift is a method, or you can say it's a function. And whenever you call functions or you call methods, you'd always need to have the parentheses in front of it. Now it is inside this parenthesis, I would write what I want JavaScript to add at the beginning of my array. So I can come here and say 100. So what's going to happen is that the onShift method will take 100 and put it at the beginning of this array, just like that. Let's see that in the console. Let's see if the onShift method was able to do that. Let's log numbers to the console once more. Come here and you can see that now in the console, the array has 100 at index 0. The array has 100 at index 0. You can see how the onShift method works, right? So that's what the onShift method does. It puts an item at the beginning of your array. Now, it's not only able to put in numbers. Do not confuse that. Any data type can go into an array. So if I want to put anything at the beginning of my array, whether it's a number, whether it's a string, whether it's a boolean, whether it's even another array, whether it's an object literal, whatever data type, I can insert it into this array I can insert it to the beginning of this array using the onShift method. So if I come there in the onShift method parenthesis and I take out 100 and I put in a string, so let's say Joseph. If I save this and I go back to the console, you'd see that at the beginning of this array, at the beginning, we have Joseph printed there. So that's fine. Right, so now we know what the onShift method does. It adds an item to the beginning of an array. Now let's look at the next array function or the next array method. That's the shift method. So the shift method or the shift function will remove an item from the beginning of an array. And this is how to use it. Call the array you want to use it on first. So I would say numbers, this is my array, and I would say shift. Remember, it's a method, so we need to just put the parentheses in front of it. Now in this case, we do not need to come here inside the parentheses and specify anything, because what this method does is to just take out anything that is at the beginning of this array. Any item that is the first item in this array, the shift method will take it out. So we don't need to specify if it's 100 or 10 or 40. The method doesn't care. Anything there, it's just going to take it out. Right? So if I come here now and I console.log the numbers array, you would realize that if in the console, we won't have number 10 there anymore. You can see we don't have 10 anymore. We just have 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. Right? So that's what the shift method or the shift function does. So let's look at another function. Let's look at the push function or the push method. Now, in arrays, the push method will add an item to the end of your array. So currently, this is the element or the item at the end of our array. It's 60. the push method will add another item. So it's going to have another item added here at the end of the array, right? That's what the push method does. Just the opposite of the unshift method. It's the opposite. The unshift method adds an item to the beginning. The push method adds an item to the end of the array. So how do you use it? Call the array you want to use it on first. Then you say numbers.push, and then you specify what you want to add to the end of the array. So I can come in here and say, I want to add Joseph Brendan to the end of the array, numbers. So if I come here and I console.log numbers now, and I go back to the console, you'd see that at the end of the array, we now have Joseph Brendan. So Joseph Brendan is now the element or the array item occupying the last index position in this array. So that's what the push method does. We have another item, or we have another function, another array function called the pop function or the pop method. Now, this method or this function removes the last item in your array, removes the item at the end of your array. In our case here, the array item at the end is 60, right? So the pop method will push that out. We'll take it out. It's going to pop it out of the array. So how do you use it? Just say numbers.pop. That's all. So you call the array you want to use it on, and then you specify that, yes, you want to pop the last item out of the array. And if I console.log numbers, you would realize that 60 will no more be in the numbers array. You can see it's popped out. That's how it works. Now let's look at another method. The next array method that we are going to look at is the reverse method. Now the reverse method just does one thing. It reverses the index arrangement, the index positions of the element in your array. As you can see in this array, 10 is occupying the index position of 0, 20 is occupying the index position of 1, 30 is occupying the index position of 2, 40 index position of 3, 50 index position of 4, and 60 index position of 5. So this is the arrangement currently in this array. If you console.log numbers and you go to the console, you'd see that the way these elements in the array is arranged is just the same way we wrote it in VS Code, right? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. So if I come here now and I want to reverse this arrangement, let's say I want the arrangement in the arrays to start from 60 to 10, right? Like I want 60 to become the first and 10 to become the last. I would use the array method called reverse. So it's going to be very easy. I would say numbers.reverse, and that's it. Numbers.reverse. When I say this, the arrangement of the element in the array, or the arrangement of the items in the array, will be reversed. So if I come here now and I log the array to the console, you'd see that 60 will become the first and 10 will become the last. As you can see here, 60 is the first now, occupying the index position of 0, and 10 is the last, occupying the index position of 5, as you can see there. Right? Very easy. So that's a very important array method. And I think we talked about the includes method also. And the includes method is a very important method. Please, if there is any method that I had missed or that I have missed, you all can remind me in our next session. If there is any method that I talked about in the live class that I can't remember now, I think I had to do a little jot down, but maybe I had missed some. So, or maybe I missed one or two methods while trying to jot down the methods I would say in this video, or the methods I would talk about in this video. So I think the next method we learned about was the includes method. Now, this method does something very simple. This is a method that you use to check if something is included in this array, if something is in this array. So is 100 included in this array as an item? No, it is not. Is 80 included as an item in this array? No, it's not. So the includes method is a method that you use to check if an item is, or if anything is included as an item in an array. As easy as that. So this is something that you'd use practically in building your applications, right? So let's say you are storing a list of, let's say, a list of countries in an array, right? You might want to sometimes check if a country is in that list of countries that you have created. And all you just need to do is to use the includes method to say, is this country included in that array that stores the list of countries? If it is, it's going to tell you true. If it's not, it's going to say false. So the includes method is used like this. For you to use the includes method to check if something is included in an array as an item, all you need to do first of all is to call that array that you want to run this search on. So I would say array or numbers, which is the name of the array, dot includes. And what I'll do is I'll put a parenthesis in front of includes, since it's a method, right? I'll put a parenthesis in front of it, and I would type in the thing I want to check for in the array. So I would come here, I would say, let's check in for 100, for example. Now this is me asking JavaScript to check if 100 is included as an array item in the numbers array. Of course, this is not true. So this operation will return a false value. Now it has returned the false value, but can we see it? No, we can't see it. If I go to the console, I won't see any response here telling me that that operation is false. But the operation is false. It has been run, but we can't see the output. We can't see the value. The way to see that is simply by creating a variable. Let's say, let's just say C output equal to numbers that includes this. So this operation will run. The output will be saved here. So let's console.log C output, and let's see the result in the console. You can see the result is false. It is false because 100 is not included as an item in the numbers array which we have here. But if I come here and I search to see if 30 is included in this numbers array, if I type in 30 there and I go to the console, you see it says true. You get it? So that's another important array method. Now there is another array method that we need to look at. It's called the index of method. Now what this array method does is simple. This array method simply gives you the index position of an item in an array. So we all know what an index position is here. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So sometimes, of course, you won't always come here manually to know or to count the index position of an item. Now, if you want to know the index position of an item inside an array, it's very simple. You can use the index of method to do that. You can use the index of method to do that. So I would come here, I would say numbers dot index of. Now ask yourself, what element are you trying to look for, or what is the element that you are trying to search for its index position? So I would say, please, can you tell me the index position of 40 in this numbers array? So I would come here and I would type in 40. Now when I type in 40, JavaScript will tell me the index position of 40 in the numbers array, and it's supposed to give me an outcome that will be saved somewhere. So for me to see that outcome, I'll just create another variable called outcome here, and that outcome will be saved here. Of course, the index position of 40 is 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So I would come here. If I console.log outcome, you'd see that my response in the console is going to be 3. So that's how we are able to grab or know the index position of an item inside an array. Now, another array method that we are going to look at today is the slice method. Now, when you have an array, right, sometimes you just want 2 or 3 items taken out of the array to be used for something outside of the array. You might want to do that in many cases, right? So it's not every time you would want to use all the items at once inside an array. Sometimes you just want 2 or 3 or 4 items out of the array. You want to take them out and use them somewhere. Now, one way you can do that is to slice the items you want from the array and take them out of the array to use them somewhere, right? You can slice the items you want out of the array and use them somewhere. So how do you slice items or elements out of an array? It's simple. Call the array you want to slice the elements out of first. Then you say dot slice. Just like this. Slice. Now, when you say dot slice, in the parenthesis of slice, the first thing you are going to do is to specify where you want to start the slicing from. From which element do you want to begin to slice from, right? That's the first thing to do. So I would come here, I would say, okay, I want to start slicing from 20. And 20 has an index position of 1. So I would use the index position of 20 to specify that it is from that point I want to start the slicing. So I want to start slicing from the element occupying the index position of 1. Then the next argument I would pass in here is where I want to stop the slicing. So where do I want to stop the slicing? Let's say I want to stop the slicing at 50, right? I want to slice 20, 30, 40. So since I want to slice 20, 30, 40, the next argument I'll put here will be the index number after 40. It's going to be the index number after the last element that I want to slice. So I want to slice 20, 30, 40 out of this array. So the way I would specify that I want to stop slicing at 40 is to put in the index number of the item after 40. So the index number of 50 is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 4. Now when I do this, JavaScript is going to start slicing from index position of 1, and it's going to stop at the item before the index position of 4. So this is me creating a range of elements that I want to slice out of an array. So this is me creating a range, right? So I'm telling JavaScript, start slicing from the element that has the index position of 1 and stop at the element. Stop at the element right before the index position of 4. Stop slicing at that element, or stop your slicing at that element. So JavaScript will do that. But of course, we can't see the result except we put it in a put it in a variable. So I would create a variable called result, and I would log that result to the console. Let's go to the console and let's see what we have in the console. You can see in the console we have 20, 30, 40, which is what is sliced out of the array to us. Now 20, 30, 40, you can see 20 is occupying the index position of 1, and 40 is the last item before the index position of 4, which is 50. So me saying 1 here and 4 here is me telling JavaScript that start the slicing from the element occupying the index position of 1. Me specifying 4 here to JavaScript means that I am telling JavaScript, stop your slicing at the element before the index position of 4. That's it. Now, there is one thing I also talked about when we looked at slicing in the live class. I made mention of the fact that when you slice elements or when you slice items out of an array, it doesn't change the array. The array remains the same. Right? The elements in the array are still the same. The array is still the same. It doesn't change. Now, for us to confirm that, I have sliced these 3 elements out of this array here. If I come here now and I log the array, the numbers array to the console, right? If I log the numbers array to the console, you'd see that the numbers array still contains everything it's used to contain, or it normally contains, right? Even though I was able to slice 3 elements out of it. Those 3 elements that I have sliced out of it will not be taken out of the array. It's not going to change the way the array is. These 3 elements are just like photocopies. This is just like me coming here to extract photocopies of 20, 30, 40 and take them out to use them to do something. Their original copies are still there, right? So that is what happens with slicing. Slicing, when you slice items out of an array, it doesn't mean that those items do not belong in that array anymore. It doesn't mean that the array would change to not have those elements anymore, right? So let's come here. Let's look at a situation where if I want to slice, let's say I want to slice from 20, right? And I just want to slice only 20. I would say 1, 1. Let's see what happens in the console. You can see we have nothing, right? The array is empty. So if I come here and I say 1, 2, you see that this is going to give me just 20. Now, I want you to know this. If you want to slice only one element out of an array, if you want to slice only one element out of an array, specify your first argument as where you want to start the slicing from. And of course, we always know that this second argument represents the position that is right after where you want to stop your slicing, right? So in this case, I put 2. The index position of 2, which is 30. Now, this is me telling JavaScript that I want to stop my slicing at this element, which is before 30, and that element is still 20. So I am starting at 20, I am ending at 20. I am starting at the index position of 1 that has 20, and I am ending also at the index position of 1 that has 20. How am I ending at the index position of 1? I'll just specify the index position of 2. And for slicing, specifying 2 here means that I want the slicing to end before the index position of 2. And before the index position of 2 is 20, which is in the index position of 1. Right? So let's come here and let's say I want to slice everything from the index position of 1 till the end of the array. Let's say I want to slice everything from index position of 1 till the end of the array. I'll just come here and I'll just write 1. When I write only 1 and I do not specify any other thing, JavaScript will slice every item from the index position of 1 till the end of the array. Now, if we come here and we console.log result, right? Just result, which is storing this. If we console.log results, you would see that it is only the items from the index position of 1 till the end of the array that is displayed. 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. Now, 10 is not displayed because we did not start slicing from 10. So that's slicing in a nutshell, right? The key takeaways here is this. Slicing does not change the array. When you slice items out of the array still remains the way it is or the way it was before you sliced it. Another key takeaway here is that the first argument is you telling JavaScript where you want to start the slicing from. The next argument here is you telling JavaScript to say, okay, I want to stop at the element before this index position. That's what you are telling JavaScript. So let's look at the next array method, which is called splicing. Not slicing this time around, splicing. Now, splicing is similar to slice, but the only difference is that when you splice items out of an array, the array changes. Any element you splice out of an array will no more belong in that array anymore. So let's come here and let's say we want to splice 20, 30, 40, right, out of this array. Let's say we want to splice 20, 30, 40. To splice also means to take out, to cut something out of the array. But in this case, when we take it out of the array, it is gone out of the array for good. It will not remain in the array anymore. This is not a carbon or a photocopy anymore. When you splice anything out of an array, it will no more belong to that array. It will be deleted from that array. So if I come here and I want to splice items out of this array called numbers, I would say numbers.splice, right? Numbers.splice. Now I would put a parenthesis there and I would specify where the splicing should start from. Now I should want to start, in my own case, I might want to start from the index position of 1. You can start splicing from anywhere. So I would come here and I would specify that I want to start splicing from the index position of 1. Now, when I do that, I'll put the comma sign and I'll tell JavaScript how many items I want to splice from the index position of 1. How many items? If I say 3, what's going to happen is that JavaScript would start from the index position of 1 to splice 3 items, to cut 3 items out of the array. So from the index position of 1, 2, and 3 items will be spliced out of the array. And I specified those 3 items by putting my second argument here as 3. So in the splice method, you specify the index position you want the splicing to start from. You put a comma sign and you come here to specify the amount of items you want to splice out of the array from this index position that you specified here. So in my own case, we started from 20, or we are starting from 20 and we are splicing till 40 by doing this. So let's come here. Let's create a variable. Let's say splice array. And we are going to set, or we are going to console.log splice array, because splice array will contain the items that we spliced from the index position of splice array rather will contain the 3 items that we have just spliced from the index position of 1 in the numbers array. So if I go to the console, you see we have those 3 items, 20, 30, 40. So that's the difference between slice, or that's one difference between slice and splice. For splice, the first argument here represents where you want to start the splicing from. The next argument represents how many items you want to splice out of the array from where you want to start from this position you have specified. So if I want to splice only 1 item, I can just come here and just put 1, and I can say maybe just do not say anything again. What's going to happen is it is only 20, which is occupying the index position of 1, that will be spliced. Right? Let's come here. Let's say 1. Okay, 20 is spliced out of the array. Now, I would want us to come here and still splice 3 items out of the array. And let us see how the array would change. Now, remember, when I logged the numbers array to the console when we learned about slice, all the elements in the array were still there. All the elements in the number array were still there when we used slice. But now that we have spliced 3 items out of this array, if I come here and I log the numbers array to the console once more, you'd see that these 3 items that we have spliced out of the array will no more be there. We are only going to have 10, 40, 10, 50, and 60 in the array. Let's come here and let's see it. You can see we have 10, 50, and 60 in this array. Let's comment this. You can see when I console.log the numbers array now, you see we only have 10, 50, and 60. The 20, 30, 40 have been spliced out of the array, which means they have been deleted out of the array. So this is one way to even delete an item out of an array. If I want to delete 20 out of this array, I'll just come here and I'll just say 1, 1, which means start splicing from the index position of 1 and only splice 1 item, which is that item at the index position of 1. When I do that, 20 will be deleted from this array. That's one way to delete items out of an array. So that's the difference between slice and splice. Those are 2 important methods too. Now let's talk about nesting of arrays. Now to nest an array simply means to put an array inside another array. That's what it means basically. Nesting of array simply means putting an array inside another array. So I would come here. I would create, I think we created an array called first array. So let's say first array, 20, 30. Let's take this out. Let's make this look like a list like we normally do. Let's say 10, 20, 40, 50. So we have an array called first array that has these 4 items. Let's create another array called second array. This array is going to have just 60, 70, 80, and 90, right? So nesting of arrays simply means taking these 2 arrays and putting them inside another array. Now, I explained in our class that nesting arrays does not mean merging the arrays. To nest is to put something inside something. If you put 2 cars in a garage, that doesn't mean that you have made the 2 cars to become 1 car. The 2 cars are still 2 cars, right? But they are being put in a garage, so they are nested in a garage. That's the exact same thing we are doing here, right? So if I want to nest this and this, I can nest the both of them inside another array, but take note, they will still be independent arrays. So let's create another array here called nested array and set this to an empty array first. Then I would want us to nest first array into nested array and second array into nested array. So let's start with first array. So I would say first array, second array. This is me nesting 2 arrays inside 1 array called nested array, right? So remember, a variable becomes what you store in it. This variable first array is an array because it's an array that I stored in it. This variable called second array is an array because I am storing an array in it. So first array is an array, second array is an array. So I have just created an array here called nested array, and I have nested these 2 arrays in nested array. So if I come here and I console.log nested array, you'd see that in the console now, I have an array here that has 2 arrays in it. Now, take a close look at the console. You'd see that in the console, when I expand this nested array, I have 2 items in the nested array. The first item occupying the index position of 0 here. This item occupying the index position of 0 is the first array, which is 10, which has 10, 20, 40, and 50 in it. Right? The next array, which occupies the index position of 1, right, has 60, 70, 80, 90 in it. Just the exact same way we have it here in VS Code. Right? So you can see that inside nested array, we have 2 arrays. This is 1 array. I have told you how to identify an array. You'd use the square bracket to identify it. You can see we have the first square bracket here with 4 items. The second set of square brackets here with 4 items. 2 arrays inside 1 array. 2 arrays nested inside 1 array. Now, when you nest items inside an array and you want to access the items in the array, right, you would use the way we normally access items in an array. Before we do that, let's come here. Let's remind ourselves how to access items in an array. So let's say I want to access 80 in second array. If I want to access 80, remember the way you access items in an array is to use their index position, right? So I would say second array, and I'll put the square brackets there. Then I would specify the index position of the element or the item that I want to access in that array. In my case, the item is 80, and it has an index position of 2, 0, 1, 2. So I would come in here and I would just specify that I want to access the item at the index position of 2, and JavaScript will access that item and give it to me. And since JavaScript wants to give me something that it has done for me, I have to collect it and put it in a variable, right? Let's just call that variable put it. And let's come here, let's console.log put it, and let's go to the console and let's see. You can see 80 is returned to me because I have accessed the item having an index position of 2 in second array, which is 80. So we have reminded ourselves how to access items in an array, right? So for this array that is a nested array, this is an array that has 2 arrays in it. This array has first array and second array in it. So how do we access? Let's say we want to access 80 again. But this time we want to access it from nested array. We don't want to just go to second array to access it. We want to access it from nested array that is nesting first and second array. Right? So if I come here and I say I want to access 80, but this time from second array, what I would first of all do, this time from nested array, what I'll do is I would say, okay, let's call nested array. Now, I have gone to nested array. Where is 80? Where is 80 staying in nested array? 80 is staying in second array, right? And second array is occupying the index position of 1 in nested array. So the first thing I have to do is I have to access second array, which is in nested array. How do I access second array, which is also an item in nested array? I can access second array by specifying its index position, which is 1. So me saying nested array 1 means I am accessing the item that is occupying the index position of 1 in nested array, and that item is second array. Now that I have accessed that array that is occupying the index position of 1 and the array is second array, it will be time for me to now access 80, right? So I would come here and I would put another square bracket. And this time I would say, okay, the item I want to access in second array now is occupying the index position of 2. 0, 1, 2. I would come here and I would say 2. So this is me telling JavaScript, go to nested array, access the item occupying the index position of 1 in nested array. What's the item? The item is second array. That's an array. And the second square bracket here is me telling JavaScript that still. Go to the index position of 2 in this second array that we have just accessed here. Go to its index position of 2 and bring what is there. Right? JavaScript will go there and bring it. Now let's save it. Let's call this variable save it. Let's save it in this variable called save it. So JavaScript will go and grab 80 and store it in the save it variable. So I'll say console.log save it. When I do that and I go to the console, you see we are able to access 80. We are able to access 80, right? And 80 this time around was accessed from nested array. We started to access it from nested array, then move down to the second array, which is nested in nested array. Then since we have accessed it with this, we went one step further to say, okay, in the nested array, bring us the element occupying the index position of 2 in the second array. In the second array, bring us the element occupying the position of 2 in the second array. We first of all access this by using this. Then use this to access the item inside this that we have accessed with this. Very easy. So I would come here, I'll take this out. And the next thing we are going to look at is how to merge arrays. We are going to look at how we can merge arrays, right? So to merge arrays, one thing I would want us to do is to use the spread operator. Now, there are other ways in which you can merge arrays, right? You can merge arrays using the concat method. And I think there are other ways you can do it apart from using the concat method. But the modern and the easy way to do this is to use the spread operator, just like we learned how to use spread operators to merge two object literals yesterday, right? So we are going to learn how to merge or concat two arrays using the spread operator also. So in two or more arrays rather, right? I keep saying two arrays, and you can nest more than two arrays also into one array. So I'm just using two for example's sake. You can nest more than two arrays inside one array. It's allowed. And you can merge more than two arrays. You can concat more than two arrays to become one array. So I would come here, I would say, okay, if I want to combine these two arrays to become one array, I would first of all create a variable called, you can see I've been using let so far, right? And nothing is wrong. So I would go back to using const now. So I would say, let's create a variable called merge array, right? Now, what do I want to merge? I want to merge first array and second array to become one array. It's very simple. All I have to do is use the spread operator. Just put the dot sign 3 times and then call the first array that you want to merge, put the comma sign, the spread operator again, call the second array that you want to merge. So now what I have here is this. I have 2 arrays being merged with the spread operator, and they will become one array called merged array. Now if I come here and I console.log merged array, you'd see that in the console we have one huge array, just 10, 20, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. We don't have 2 arrays anymore like we had when we nested 2 arrays into one array. We don't have 2 arrays. We just have one huge array. We just have one huge array that contains everything from the 2 arrays that we merged. Right? So that's the difference between merging and nesting. When you nest, the arrays still exist independently. When you put 2 cars in a garage, you still have 2 cars in the garage. But merging is when you take 2 cars, combine them to make 1 car. That's merging, right? So that's what we have just seen how to do here. We have seen how to merge 2 arrays to become one array object. Very, very cool. So one other method that we talked about, just in case I have forgotten, I think we talked about reduce, or no, we didn't talk about reduce. Okay, I only explained, maybe I talked about map, but I didn't demonstrate it. Right? Okay. Let's just move on to talk about how array and object. Let's move on to talk about it. Almost 1 hour in. So let's move on to talk about array and object, how they relate. So in our session, if you remember, I made mention of the fact that data, right, is mostly stored in an object literal. Data is mostly stored in an object literal, right? But that data would not always be kept in an object literal. So this is the example I used, right, in the live session. Now, what did I do in the live session? Right? I made an example of the fact that when you create an app, right, you'd want users to sign up to the app. Now, you'd be the one to decide the data you want to collect from the users for them to be able to sign up to the app. So let's say you assume that you want to collect their full name, email address, and password so that they can sign up. You would create the app and launch it that way. Now, this is what happens in real life. When one user comes and they sign up, their details, right? Their details. So let's say you decided to collect the user's full name, their email address, and their password. These are the information you need from the users so that they can sign up to your app. Now you decide that these are the things you need. Now when user 1, your first user, comes to your app, what they'll do is they will provide their full name. So let's say their full name is Joseph. They'll provide their full name, they'll provide their address, and they'll provide their email address, and they'll provide their password, right? Now what happens is that for each user that creates an account on your app, an object is created for them. An object literal is created to store their own details. So each user will have an object literal storing their own details. Each user will have an object literal created for them storing their own details. Now, this is going to be very reasonable because you can't use one object literal to store the details for 1 million users. Just imagine that you have this as an object literal, right? And the first user's name is Joseph. You store it this way. The second user's name is Anne. You store it that way. The third user's name is Mary. You store it that way. The fourth user's name is John. You store it. Just imagine that you have this. Imagine you have full name and you have 1 million names in front of full name. That's not a clean way to keep data. Imagine you have email address and you have 1 million email addresses in front of email address. It's not going to make any sense, right? So we can't store data that way. So what happens is that for each user that uses your app, for each user that creates an account, their own object literal will be created to store their own user records, so that we can easily tie any detail to them, so that we can easily sort it, so that we can easily say, okay, this user is this user. So in our example, we demonstrated a case for 4 users of our application. So we are saying that we are assuming that 4 users, right? We are assuming that 4 users are created, or 4 users created an account on our app. So for the first user, Mary Zoe, these are their, or this is their details. The second user, Andrew Bain. The third user, Lindsay Lohan. The fourth user, Bola Zoe, right? Now, I made mention of the fact that for the fact that independent object literals are created for these users doesn't mean that they should live independently. Remember, in computer engineering, objects are created to exist independently first by default. Objects are created mostly in isolation, right? So we can't just imagine we have 1 million users. So does it mean we are going to have 1 million object literals staying anywhere in the app, staying on their own, not knowing about each other, or just scattering themselves everywhere? That's not going to be a clean way to keep data or keep records, right? This is just like the example I gave in the class. Right? If I tell you to go to your school or go to your class and then sort out all the students from Brazil, sort out all the students from America, and sort out all the students from, let's say, Kenya. Now, when I tell you to sort all that detail and send to me, let's say I'm your professor, the way you would do it is you would look for a book to contain the names of all the students from Brazil. You would look for another book that will contain the name of all the students from Canada. You'd look for another book that will contain the name of all the students from Kenya. That's how you do it in real life, yeah? Now, that's how data is treated in computer engineering too, right? So we can't just come here and allow all the data, right, meant for keeping the user records to be scattered somewhere. Since all of these object literals are all storing user records, we should put them in one block, put them in one family, put them in one unit, put them in one container. Since they are all storing the same type of data, since all these object literals are doing is that they are storing the records of our users. So what we are going to do is we are going to put them in one family. Grab this, put this here, grab this, put this here. This is us putting them in one container. Now, this container is going to be an array. So the array is always going to be the container for your object literals that are storing the same thing, right? When you have the need for an object literal, or for object literals to store the same type of data, like user data for 10,000 users, all the object literals, right, will be stored inside an array. So in essence, arrays are containers also for object literals. You can put object literals inside an array, right? So let's come here. Okay, you give me a second. Okay. 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 All right. I hope the mic I hope the mic is actually recording. I can't understand the wave. So hopefully it's recording. If not, I would have to do this again. So let's come here. So the array, right? Your arrays will be used to store or to list objects. So when you have an object literal that is maybe storing student records, all those object literals that will be created for each student, they will all be stored in an array. So if I come here and I want to have, let's say, an array that will store object literals containing user record, I can come here and have an array. I would say user record array. And since the array will be storing object literals, this is how you put an object literal inside an array. Very simple. Now, I made mention of the fact why we do not need to name this object literal anymore. If you can remember, I made mention that the reason why we give names to things is so that we can call them or we can have access to them. Even as human beings, that's why we have names, so that we can be, our attention can be called easily. People can have access to us by just mentioning our name. So if there is a way you can access something already, if there is a way you can use to call something in programming already, you do not need to give it a second name. In this case, I have an object literal here that is occupying the index position of 1 inside this array. If I want to access this, that is occupying the index position of 0 in this user record array. So if I want to access this object literal occupying the index position of 0 in this user record array, all I have to do is just say user record. We all know how to access things in an array, right? User record square bracket 0. When I do this, when I say user record array square bracket 0, I would have access to this object literal, which is occupying the index position of 0 in that array. So as long as we can access the element, as long as we can access the item, right? We do not need to now give it a new name again. That's going to be too much. So I can come here now and I can say full name. So let's say Joseph. Let's say email address. Let's say joe@mail.com. Let's come here. Remember, this is an object literal, and this is how we list things in an object literal. We do this with the property value structure, and we separate each line with the comma sign. So I would come here and I would say password, and I would just put in pass there. Now, this is one object literal in the user record array. So let's list another object literal. Remember, the way you list things inside an array is just to separate them with the comma sign. So I have one item in the array. I want to create a new item in the array, which is another object literal. I have to separate them with the comma sign. I would come here and I will create another object literal, still storing the same properties, right? Full name. So let's say Angela. Let's say email address. Let's say Angie@mail.com. Let's say password. And let's just say pass also. So I have two items in my array now. I have this first object literal and this second object literal. Now, this first object literal is occupying the index position of 0, and the second object literal is occupying the index position of 1. I can have another object literal inside this array, right? And it's going to take the same properties. Remember, we are storing, or we are taking arrays that are doing, we are taking object literals that are storing the same data, and we are listing them inside an array. So they are storing the same data. I won't go and take the object literal of maybe student records or maybe market records. I won't go and take that object literal and now put it in the same array as these object literals. It's not going to make sense, right? So this is a container. The array is a container that is containing object literals that are doing the same thing, maybe storing one type of record, right? Maybe like the user record. That's what the array does in this case. So your arrays would always store objects that are doing one thing, that are just storing the same type of data over and over and over again. If you have the need for another type of data, you create another array to store different object literals for that need. Do not forget that. So I can come here and I can say Joseph, and I can say Lindsay Lohan. I like that name because I think it's a Hollywood name or something. So I can say Lindsay at mail.com, and I can say password, and I can say pass. Now you can see I have an array called user record array, and it has 3 items in it. It has 3 object literals. Let's console.log user record array. Let's see what we have in the console. Let's say console.log user record array. Right, go to the console and let's see what we have. In the console, you can see that in the user record array, I have 3 items. The first item is an object literal occupying the index position of 0. The second item is also an object literal occupying the index position of 1. And the third item in my array is also an object literal occupying the index position of 2. So you can see we have this. So this is like a database structure, right? This is like a database structure for data. You can see how they are arranged, right? The same object literals with the same properties, but storing different values. This is for Joe. This is for Angela. This is for Lindsay. So this object literal is storing the user record for Lindsay. This is storing the user record for Angela. And this object literal is storing the user record for Joseph. Right? So now the next question you might want to ask is, how do we access maybe one object literal? Since these 3 object literals are in an array, you access them the same way you access items in an array. If I want to access this object literal, I would look at the index position it is occupying in the array. It is occupying an index position of 1. So I would come here, I would say user record array, I'll put 1. This is me logging that object literal to the console, right? Because it is having the index position of 1 in the user record array. So this is me accessing it and logging it to the console. I am accessing the item occupying the index position of 1 in user record array, and I am logging it to the console, just like this. You can see in the console, we have only that one in the console. Now I can go ahead to say, okay, now that I have accessed this item, accessed this item occupying the index position of 1, and I have seen that the item is an object literal, can I access a property in the object literal? Let's say, can I access email address? Yes, I can do that. I'll just come here and I'll put dot, I'll say email address. Why is this working fine? This is working fine because what we accessed with this statement is an object literal. What we accessed with this statement is an object literal. So basically, it's now an object literal that's here. What we have accessed is an object literal. So basically, this is now an object literal. And an object literal, you can access the properties in an object literal using the dot sign. So you would say dot, then the name of the property. In this case, email address, right? So I would come here. When I save that, and I go to the console, you see the email address would be angie@mail.com, which is the email address of this object literal that occupies, or which is the email address in this object literal that occupies the index position of 1. So this is how we work with arrays, or this is how we combine arrays and object literals to work. And we are going to see more of this. So I had to re-record this session so that we take very good note of this and expect to see this over and over. And please, anyone can volunteer. Anyone can volunteer to always remind me when the sessions want to start that I should record, right? I think if someone had reminded me, I wouldn't have forgotten to record. Maybe because I just woke up from a nap. When I started the class, I was just coming fresh out of a nap, right? So maybe I had forgotten because of the nap. So thank you all, and thank you all. Thank you all for always showing up, and thank you all for always practicing and following the way I expect you all to follow. Now, I would like to know if anybody watched the video to this point. If you watched the video to this point, right? If you watched the video to this point in the live session, just come in and type in ha ha ha. And I'll know that you watched the video to this point. Just type in ha 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 in the live session. In our next live session, then I'll know that you watched the video to this point. Thank you very much.